Hello there, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to another RebelScum.com video review. Today, we are taking another look at one of the figures in the retro line from Hasbro, and honestly, this one's the headliner of this wave of the retro line, the Mandalorian himself. So today, we're reviewing the retro, the Mandalorian figure. And as soon as the series was out back in December of 2019, and the excitement was there for the Mandalorian, of course followed a bunch of vintage style customs of the Mandalorian action figures. And then with the success of the retro line from Hasbro, waves 1 and 2, waves 1 being Star Wars card and wave 2 being Empire Strikes Back card in 2020, Hasbro capitalized on that success with another fantastic line, wave 3 not being Return of the Jedi, no, but rather being the Mandalorian, which me personally, I'm very pleased and excited about that. When Hasbro started doing retro figures, I wanted them to do characters that weren't in the vintage toy line. So in the first wave, a figure that wasn't in there was Tarkin, which was very exciting because the first Tarkin figure, while Kenner did produce the first Tarkin figure, it wasn't until after the 95 revitalization of Power of the Force 2 on red card, but his figure came out a couple years later on their green card back. So, while very cool, seeing Hasbro come back and do a true vintage style Tarkin was really exciting. And then in their second wave, they also did another figure that wasn't ever released in the original vintage toy line, which was a snowspeeder pilot Luke Skywalker. And unlike the vintage X-Wing pilot Luke Skywalker, I actually really liked this Luke a little bit more because it wasn't confusing the way they molded the visor. The visor was down, it had the big yellow lenses, it looked really cool. Whereas the X-Wing Luke had the visor up on his forehead, and it was kind of ambiguous as to whether that was some weird hairline or his visor, which of course it's supposed to be a visor, but it wasn't the correct color, so it was very confusing. So I love how Hasbro did that. And then late 2020, they announced, hey, we're doing a Mandalorian line. And super, super awesome. We got the Mandalorian, Cara Dune, IG-11, Queel, the Child, Moff Gideon, Season 2 Grief Karga, which still, I don't know why they keep doing Season 2 Grief Karga instead of 1, and a Remnant Trooper. All awesome figures. Really, the only reused molds from original molds was IG-11. It was just a repainted IG-88, and the Remnant Stormtrooper for, well, obvious reasons. I mean, it's just a repainted Stormtrooper, so why wouldn't they? But this is a trend that I hope Hasbro keeps pursuing. I would love to see Clone Wars characters in the retro toy line, Rebels characters even. I would honestly speculate that Hasbro would do Rebels probably before Clone Wars because, well, Rebels I think would fit a retro theme easier than Clone Wars would, much like the Mandalorian has. But enough about all that. Here is the 5 points of articulation, retro style, vintage style, the Mandalorian action figure. A figure that Hasbro gave us, and it just looks incredible. Look at him. It's from his first appearance in Season 1, where his armor is all mixed matched. You've got his pulse rifle, you've got his blaster pistol. It's all there in the bubble. On the back, one of the things they do with retro that I kind of wish they would go back to that vintage card back style where you had the figures kind of arranged on the back. Whereas on the first couple of waves, Hasbro kind of had to play it a little bit more safe because, well, there's some out there who try to pass off re-release figures as original figures. You don't really have that danger with characters that didn't even exist back then. So I kind of hope maybe for future retro waves that aren't re-released original vintage characters to maybe have that original trend of having the figures arranged on the backs. I think that would be very cool. But there he is in the card back, and then with a little bit of quick movie magic, here he is loose. And again, 5 points of articulation. This figure looks really great. I love the way they did his cape. They did it in that classic vintage cape style. So it's just right there over his shoulders. I mean, it looks more like a cloak than a cape. Actually, it looks like a trench coat on this guy. Looks like a trench coat. But you got all of his mixed match armor. You've got his beige shoulder pauldron. You got his brown one. You've got his brown gauntlets, his hand pads. You've got that brown chest plate. You've got his bandolier going across his chest. You've got his belt, which now, being a retro style figure, they didn't really have figures where their blasters went in holsters, so he does have a molded holster that you can't put his blaster in, which, while that is a shame, it's not really a shame for a retro figure. You've got his brown thigh plate, his beige thigh plate, his blue knee pad, and his brown shore trooper leg right there. Looks very, very cool. Here is the pulse rifle. Classic Bident looking design. Love it. Love seeing it in that vintage plastic casted style. You can, of course, put it in either of his hands so he can hold it straight out. Or you can give him his blaster pistol. And then, of course, I love the classic Beskar helmet that he's got on. It looks fantastic. And that's pretty much it for the figure design of itself. For comparison, here he is next to the Vintage Collection, the fully articulated 3 3/4 scale The Mandalorian figure of this same design. You can just kind of see how they compare. And I think they both look very, very good. And for those of you wondering, no, he can't really carry his Bident on his back, but if you just kind of like push it into the back of his cape, like so, it does kind of keep it on his back, just from the pressure of the tightness of the cape to his back, does kind of keep it on there. So if you wanted to display it as so, you could. I think it works. Also, for comparison, here he is next to the retro release, the Mandalorian figure that started it all for us, Boba Fett. And they look so awesome side by side together. It really does truly look fantastic. Just, this is just a really awesome pair of figures. I mean, if you only have to get 2 retro figures ever, I mean, why wouldn't it be these 2? Put his blaster back in his hand, he dropped it. Why wouldn't it be these 2? They look so awesome. And the other thing I like about the retro Mando figure is they didn't just repaint the Boba Fett figure. Hasbro actually took the time and did the work to not only give us a whole nother figure mold here, but they also, I think, accomplished very well that vintage retro style that, well, a lot of us fans love and many fans started with. So there you go. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into this review of the Star Wars Retro The Mandalorian. I know I said that twice, but I mean, it's part of the Mandalorian wave of, and it is the Mandalorian. So there you go. Make sure you check out other rebelscum.com content. Make sure you like and subscribe. Please comment on this video. What's a retro figure you're excited about? What are some characters in Star Wars that you would love to see get their own wave in the retro line that Hasbro has been doing? Do you like the retro line? Maybe you don't. Maybe it's not for you. Maybe you want to see some of the characters that they've done in retro line make their way into Vintage Collection, because not all of them have. So maybe we'll see those sometime soon. But please leave us that feedback. And make sure you check us out on social media and watch rebelscum.com for daily news and articles. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. We'll see you guys later. We'll see you another time. May the Force be with all of you, you Rebel Scum.